Thank you for joining us today. Again, we are Sense Corp, and what we focus on is really turning data into actionable insights and transforming organizations for the digital era. We do that in three core practice areas of data, digital, and transformation. And here today to present to you is Josh Rockner. He is the practice lead for our data expertise, and Michael Daney, who heads up our transformation practice. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Michael kick us off. Michael?
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. I know Josh and I are looking forward to a good discussion. And as Josh alluded to, we'll be talking about closing the last mile of analytics. And really what that means is analytics transformation. So as we think about transformation projects with our clients, we always root those conversations in what is your operating model? What's at the center of your operating model? And largely what that means is what are the things you're investing in that drive profitability? Historically, those conversations have often led us to talk about things like large capital assets, machinery, manufacturing capabilities, and the people that do the work. But over the last several years, as we've seen the rise of data and analytics, those conversations have changed a little bit. And what we hear more and more from our clients, no matter what industry they're in, is, hey, you know what's at the center of my operating model now? It's data and analytics. That's what is guiding every interaction, it's driving every process, and really ensuring that I'm making the optimal decisions to make my organization successful. And so as you think about that, that has made data, and more specifically analytics, the most valuable asset at the center of many of our client organizations. And so with that, there is an increased imperative to invest in that, and to grow it such that it becomes a more valuable asset and enabler of growth. So a couple of stats here that we think are really telling in that space. One is this idea that 187 billion, that's billion with a B, right, invested in increased analytics spend. So folks get it, right? Our clients understand we need to do this. We have to disrupt or be. The challenge is that doing it is much easier said than done. And so you have this sobering statistic on the right, which is 1 in 2 of these projects fail. And so a lot of what Josh and I will be talking about today is not just what is data science, what's AI, machine learning, helping educate on those topics, but also how do you effectively implement those things and increase the likelihood of your success on an analytics transformation. So that really sets up our agenda for the day. Josh will spend some time introducing these concepts around data science, artificial intelligence. We'll spend some time talking about what we call the last mile of analytics. Certainly you saw that in the title of the webinar. And we'll help explain what that means, why it's so challenging and so important. And then we'll talk about a few case studies of how we have helped organizations tackle that last mile in a way that really does drive value for the organization. We'll spend the remainder of the time getting into a few tips and kind of guiding principles for how to set up your project for success, and how to get started. And then certainly we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Josh, and he's going to get into a little bit more detail around some of these concepts.
I appreciate it, Michael. And one of the things that we do like to do in these types of talks is really start out with some of the more foundational content. I know that we have a variety of different folks on this call with a variety of different kind of backgrounds and skill sets. And so we want to start with some definitions first. And the idea is that we'll continue to build and to get to some more of the meat on the bone as we continue. So first off, what is data science? So we pulled 3 different definitions here. I'm going to read these off. I promise I won't read the text for the entire presentation, but we'll just kind of start and walk through these. So the first one is data science combines different fields of work in statistics and computation for better decision making. And I think that is really important. We'll touch on that kind of later in the presentation. Time to decision is very important. Secondly here, data science is the study of generalizable extraction of knowledge from data. So this is really the idea of getting to a next level of insights from our information. Again, another big theme that we'll be talking about through this presentation. And then lastly here is my personal favorite. Data science is what data analysts say when asked what they do for a living at the bar, and I think that might have come from Michael.
I don't know if it's a bad joke. It probably did come from me.
So let's really talk about what Sense Corp believes that data science really is. And if I was to really kind of boil it down, to us, it's really these few different disciplines that allow us to get to a greater level of insights from our data. It's this intersection of these three very specific interdisciplinary approaches. So we'll just kind of walk through. So the first is computer science skills, the coding and the programming that goes into reaching these next level of data science and next level of capabilities. The kind of second leg to this stool there is what we call math and statistics knowledge. So applying advanced mathematics and advanced statistics to solve these next generation of problems. And then lastly is, and I think maybe most importantly, is this idea of domain expertise or subject matter expertise. You know, one of the things that we talk about is that next generation analytics really requires a next level of commitment and engagement and skill set in order to be successful, in order to get to this next level of insight in our data. And so we believe that data science is a key component to that, key skill set to that. So as we sort of continue here, we're going to keep in the spirit of definitions, but we'll kind of blaze through this pretty quickly. So then you ask yourself, okay, what is AI and ML? You know, I've heard of these concepts of artificial intelligence or machine learning, and so we're just going to step through these. So first, AI or artificial intelligence. This is a subfield within data science. And really the idea very simply behind this is automating human intelligence using these new techniques. And so there's two different types of artificial intelligence. The first is what we call weak AI. So weak AI is the idea that we're solving or automating human intelligence for a very specific set of problems and a very specific set of objectives, so to speak. An example of this might be recommending the type of parts that a technician needs when they go out in the field to address a maintenance issue. Or this could be predicting a risk profile for a customer. Again, these are very specific set of problems. We're going to apply a very specific set of techniques to those problems to reach our objective. The second one here is what we call strong AI. So strong AI is really what I think everybody's really worried about. This is when we have superhumans and aliens and robots that are taking over the world. And this is the idea that we're solving human intelligence and automating human intelligence for a new and novel set of problems. So we're addressing maybe even some things that humans can't address within our own capacity. The reality is that weak AI is really kind of the space and the evolution of where we are today in terms of the enterprise and the type of work that we're doing in this space. You know, we certainly, Michael, we would never, you know, sell something with the word weak in it, but this is really kind of where we are today.
It's the more practical endeavor right now, as you mentioned, in the enterprise space. So we should probably find a better brand for it than weak, but
there you go.
That's where it is.
And then as we take one step further, there's this idea of machine learning or ML. And for the purposes of this discussion and the conversations that we're having at organizations, we tend to use these sort of interchangeably. But really, machine learning is actually a subfield of AI. And I think of this as sort of the how. This is where we're actually applying data mining techniques and statistical and mathematical models to reach a next level of prediction and a next level of insight within our data and within our information. And so as we look at this, there's really three different types of machine learning, and I'll just kind of walk through these with you. So the first is supervised learning. So supervised learning is the idea that we have a very specific set of objectives, and we have a very specific set of rules and patterns. So a kind of good example for this that some of us may even be familiar with is the idea of maybe predicting customer churn. And so with this, we know that what we want to do is really focus on determining whether or not our customer is going to leave, let's say, out 120 days. And we generally know the rules and patterns of what it takes, or the data points of what it takes for that customer to get to that point. And so again, that's an example. We have an objective, we have the rules and patterns, and we're predicting whether or not that customer is going to leave. The second is unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning is the idea that we don't have the specific objective, and we also do not have the rules and the patterns. And so this would be an example where we have a customer data set, and we want to take that customer data set and just learn something interesting about it, or get to some kind of insight from that data without telling it the specific type of objective or the specific rules or patterns. So in some cases, this might be, segmenting my customers, or just providing some interesting information that we might want to know to make better decisions. And then the last there is what we call reinforcement learning. This is really just a hybrid or a mixture of supervised and unsupervised learning. And this is the idea that we either have the objective and we don't have the rules and patterns, or we have the rules and patterns and we don't have the objective. And really, the best example I can give here is maybe a video game, where we provide the machine learning algorithm, here is a recipe for how to win, but we don't tell them actually the steps and strategies on how to actually win the game. So if I just kind of step back a little bit here and summarize, we have data science as this practice or set of interdisciplinary approaches to achieve a next level of insights from our information. AI being a subfield of that, and that's really the what we're trying to achieve, and automating human intelligence. And then lastly is machine learning, which is the how, and really the nuts and bolts of how to get to those better answers. All right, so we're gonna kind of take a step back and have a little bit of fun here for a minute. We have two specific examples, two kind of common world examples, and we like to take these kind of scenarios or kind of what we're calling this artificial intelligence example, and really take it and then apply it to a more of an enterprise setting. So we're going to start here with Pac-Man, and this is one of my favorites. So our problem statement here is that we are playing this game and we don't want to get eaten. We want to eat all the white dots. We want to end the game as quickly as possible, and of course we want to eat the big dots as well, and continue to avoid the ghosts. There's actually 3 different strategies for a winning recipe in Pac-Man, and I won't go through all of those. And there's also mixtures of strategies that you can use to also win the game as well. And the objective here, though, is that we're going to kind of show you an AI simulation of Pac-Man. We've created and trained an AI to beat and win at Pac-Man. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through that here.
Here, I thought Josh was busy all week, but it seems like he's been playing Pac-Man.
So what we have here is a AI engine, and it's using a specific strategy where it's just strictly avoiding the ghosts. And so again, like I said, there's three different kind of ways that we can do this. But ultimately, the reason that we show this is we're just kind of watching this game is that this uses what's called a pathfinding algorithm. And this pathfinding algorithm is really fundamental to dozens and dozens of other machine learning algorithms, from decision trees to a variety of survival analysis, to a variety of other tools and techniques that we can use to solve very similar problems like routing optimization or getting myself out of a maze. And so we'll just kind of continue watching this, and then in a moment, I'm going to show a couple more simulations. It won't show it visually, but it will show just kind of the program and what it can output. And while that's coming up, I'll just kind of continue talking through that here. But the idea is that I'm going to show you, it's called the expect max algorithm or strategy. And so this is kind of what you saw before. And there's a parameter in here called depth. And the depth is how many steps forward that we're going to look in our AI engine. And so as I increase the depth, you can see I'm continuing to die, and I'm simulating using this specific strategy. I've increased the depth, so number of spaces ahead that I'm looking. You can see the algorithm is slowing down, but you saw I just got a victory, so that's good. And actually, I won't continue doing it, but if I increase the depth to a 5, or even increase the depth to a 10, the time that it takes for each one of these games to play is going to slow down. But ultimately, I can result in a winning strategy 100% of the time. And ultimately, this automates a level of human intelligence that we certainly couldn't do on our own. All right, so we're going to continue on. So we have a second artificial intelligence example. And this is what we call refrigerator analytics. And this is, I think, one of our favorite problems that we've solved. So as we look at kind of this problem, or really opportunity here, we want to ensure that at any point in time, our refrigerator has enough beer on stock or in inventory. And then we also want to ensure that we have the right mix of beer at any point in time. I don't know, Michael, what's your favorite beer?
You know that, those cookies. I see a shiner on the picture, but.
Josh, what about you? What's your favorite beer?
I'll go for the National Beer Texas, a Lone Star.
There you go. You're not much of a beer guy. So here, as we looked at this problem, we saw that there's really 2 different strategies to this problem. The first strategy is really just having our office manager sort of manually check from time to time. And, I think that works fairly successfully. But we certainly had some challenges with that. And I think she's on the phone, so I promise you're doing a great job. But as we really looked at this problem, we saw that, we can apply some of our data and analytics capabilities to this problem and really achieve a next level of insight and automation in this scenario. And so what we actually did is we installed some Arlo cameras in our refrigerator. I know this is you might think we're crazy, but I promise this is really cool stuff. And so we installed these cameras in our refrigerator at the office here in Austin, Texas. And we take a screen image every 15 minutes. And once we take that image, we do a couple different data science techniques, or really machine learning techniques, from object and image recognition to OCR to natural language processing. And we're effectively able to determine what our inventory and mix of beer is in our refrigerator. And then we take that information and we compare it to an expected inventory level. And then based on kind of that threshold, we then send out an alert to our office manager, both in the form of a phone call and a text message, just to let her know and alert her that it's time for us to go ahead and restock the refrigerator. And so again, this is just, as we go through this is going to be an example that we're going to come back to in the end of the presentation, because we want to show you kind of from a last mile analytics what the art of the possible really looks like. But again, we wanted to show you kind of a real world example as well here. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a step back from some of the kind of demos and some of the cute stuff, and we're going to ask sort of a key question here. And the question is, why do we care about data science, and how does it fit into the broader data and analytics landscape? So I don't know, Mike, I'll kind of ask you the question. If we look at this, I think specifically the real question that we have to ask is, why data analytics? Why do we care?
I think it's a lot like the Pac-Man example. Actually, it's about decision making, right? Having the right information to make the best decision and get the right action.
That's right. Kind of time to decision support. These are all things that all of our organizations are continuing to focus on daily. So let's look at this sort of visually here. As you look on the left side, we look at this. These are enterprise data assets, and we're all familiar with this. Many of us work with this data on a daily basis. As that data transforms and conforms, it starts to turn into information. It starts to become more useful. As that information continues to transform, it starts to turn into analytics, turns into something meaningful that we can actually use. The reality is that there's a variety of different types of analytics and a variety of different maturity of analytics. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the different types here, but what we can see certainly that there's a difference of what's happening here. And so the rightmost point of each of those bars is what we call an insight. And from that insight, which again, the whole purpose of why we're doing this work, as Michael had alluded, just one second here, folks. Sorry about that.
If PowerPoint's going to crash, it's good that we have the technology to fix it, right?
That's right. So again, the whole reason that we do these analytics is to get to an insight and ultimately get to a decision point, get to a point of action, and ultimately get to an outcome. And that's really what we're after here. But as you look at this, there's really another dimension, and it's what we're calling the human input or human component. So depending on the maturity of analytics and level of type of analytics that we're doing, it requires a different level of human to take that insight and actually get to decision, point of action, and ultimately to an outcome. But really, coming back to the question, the whole reason that we care about data science is that as you get to the more advanced analytics, so if you start there on descriptive and diagnostic, this is some of our more traditional business intelligence and looking historical and understanding kind of what happened and why did it happen and kind of drilling into that information. But as you get to the more predictive and prescriptive analytics, this is where we're really starting to get to a greater level of automation. And ultimately, this is where we're getting to where we have to leverage these new data science techniques in order to get there. And you'll notice there finally that as we get to prescriptive analytics, we're starting to really start to reduce the amount of human input, not completely, and we're always repurposing those folks to be productive in different ways, but really starting to get to a greater level of decision automation and decision support. So to summarize here though, and coming back to the topic of the presentation, last mile analytics. What we mean by last mile analytics is going from insight to point of action. And so we're going to continue to talk about that here through the presentation.
Yep, that's exactly right, Josh. And as we kind of talk about the last mile, that really is where we take that analytic insight, as Josh mentioned, to the decision to drive the action. And what I want you to focus in on here is that third bullet point, that third check mark up top. It says challenging because humans are involved, right? I mean, as you look at this flow, I know we saw a lot of folks on the call who have a deep data background. You all know that the blue stuff on here, getting your data foundation right and building out those analytics, that is incredibly challenging, no doubt. But when you start bringing the humans in, right, how do you take that insight of that analytic and provide it to them in a way that drives the optimal decision? That's really, really a lot of the challenge. So at the start of the call, we talked about how Sense Corp does work in data, digital, and transformation. This area we've got highlighted for the last mile, that's really where those three things all have to interact, and there's kind of an intersection between them, where we take the data, we oftentimes use a digital platform or tool of some kind to provide it to the human or more the people transformation side to drive those optimal decisions. So it's the most important part of the journey, and it's the hardest part of the analytics journey, and that's really what we'll spend the rest of the time talking about today, of how to be successful in that last mile. So Josh, you want to talk a little bit about some examples of how a few of our clients are doing this?
Yeah, so let's just kind of step through this here. And there's kind of 4 different examples that I'll just sort of quickly touch on. And then again, we'll get to some of the more practical kind of application. But kind of this first one is called edge intelligence. So there's a whole space around Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things and leveraging sensor data to get to a next level of insights, whether we're pushing those analytics down to the edge or consuming data from the edge and getting to a next level of analytics. And really the idea behind it is really trying to understand when are these, for assets, an example, when are these parts going to fail, or predicting a failure, making sure to kind of reduce the total cost of maintenance once we kind of get into having to fix specific issues out in the field. And so there's, again, whole space around edge intelligence, but getting that data out to the point of action out in the field, whether that's oil and gas or telecom or healthcare, some of these different industries, really an important area of focus. The second one is around customer-facing digital platforms. So think about all the different customer experiences and customer portals and mobile apps, and taking our analytics and that rightmost point of that bar that we just looked at, and getting those insights out to the point of action, out to those mobile apps, getting those predictions and recommendations feathered into those tools. And then also, and one of the challenges around last mile analytics, allowing for that feedback so we can train our analytics, train our data science models to be smarter and better, and continue to provide the right level of information to our end users. The third one there, operational systems and ERPs. We do a lot of work within the Salesforce space and embedded analytics within those systems to provide a next level of engagement, with our partners and our customers and our employees. And certainly, big opportunity now is virtual assistants and chatbots, and really kind of getting analytics integrated and getting a next level of intelligence and AI into those systems as well. And then lastly is analytics dashboards and data visualization. Certainly this is still a very critical space. This is a critical part of last mile, and giving our users the right tools they need to take the data and insights kind of to the next level is certainly a very critical aspect of tackling the last mile as well. So we're going to look at this as we kind of walk through. We call this the data science pyramid, and we're also going to talk to this in terms of almost kind of like a maturity model. And so as we focus on the right side here on this data science pyramid, there's different layers of capabilities that you see. And I'm not going to talk through all these different layers, but even folks on the call may have big investments in different layers here of this pyramid. So starting at the bottom is we have the data acquisition level, and we're dealing with a variety of different types of data sets and different volumes and speeds of data, and a lot of evolving and maturing from that perspective. We got to get our hands wrapped around that, leverage the tools and capabilities to store it, manage it. As we continue up the pyramid, data engineering and just conforming this data and the different tooling that's required to do it, making sure we're doing it with a high level of fidelity. As we continue on, at master data management and data governance, a lot of us have big initiatives around this and making sure that we have the right level of data quality for our information, because we believe that the same impact that unclean water could have on a community, the same impact that unclean data can have on an organization. And then, of course, continue on the reporting and BI capabilities that a lot of us are familiar with, and then ultimately kind of this North Star of data science and next level of capabilities. And so as we kind of look at this, we've always sort of believed in this top-down and bottom-up approach of, hey, pro tip, we don't have to be perfect at every layer of this pyramid, but we have to have some level of fidelity, but we also have the opportunity to start thinking about the art of the possible and starting to really kind of raise the water level. So that's what you see here on the left side is just kind of talking through sort of that stair step. We start with maturing. And so again, getting out there, kind of talking through what this actually looks like and what this means. And, we're working on a scenario around obsolete inventory at one of our clients and figuring out how to reduce the volume of obsolete inventory and using statistical and mathematical techniques to address that. And while we're going through that and maturing and raising awareness of what's possible, we're finding some of those data quality challenges. We're determining what it would actually take to get this to the last mile and really get the value out of it. And all the while, it's forcing us to focus on our foundational levels and continuing to do that. As we continue on, this idea of operationalizing or starting to embed analytics. It's taking those solutions and those use cases that we're continuing to iterate on, and we're starting to deploy those across the organization. We're starting to also, take on some of these newer techniques around training our models and making our models smarter, and that's a new concept for a lot of us. And then also starting to really have or identify transformation opportunities. I think Michael touched on this in the end, but just getting to a level of new insights isn't enough. Getting to the last mile actually still isn't enough. We've got to ultimately up top, you can see transforming. We have to start doing business differently. We have to start creating new value for ourselves, and we have to start unlocking the value from our information, as it exists today.
Yeah, and I think, Josh, on this, one thing you and I see frequently is when we present a view like this, it can be very challenging to say, I don't know if I want to spend time and money and resources at the top of the pyramid. I hear all the time in my organization, we've got data quality issues, we've got master data management, data governance challenges. And while there is such importance in getting those layers solid, I think we like to think about it like a cake, right? You don't have to get every layer right, but if you take some proof of concepts, as Josh mentioned, or some smaller use cases, and think about a slice of the cake, right? That helps you see where you may have gaps and challenges throughout, whether it's data quality, master data, data acquisition. And that's really how you attack this, because we could spend years and millions of dollars trying to optimize our data acquisition, and that really becomes a roadblock to the data science or analytics enabled transformation.
So as we continue on, I'm going to just talk quickly about one case study, and then I'll pass it back to Michael. But this is a fleet management company that we've been partnered with for many years. And if we go back to the Pac-Man methodology, their problem or opportunity was to double the size of their fleet from 500,000 vehicles to 1 million vehicles over a 5-year period. And so they looked at all the different strategies and approaches that they could take. And what they determined that our primary strategy for enabling this would not be lots of human inputs and lots of manual labor and adding headcount. They decided that data and analytics would be at the core of their universe and really be the primary strategy for achieving this. And so we partnered with them and took them through a multi-year journey to stand up their enterprise data warehouse, and analytics platform, and enterprise data lake, and all these different capabilities, which ultimately got them to a total cost of ownership of their fleet down to the vehicle level. And this really helped them transform, and it really was an enterprise-wide effort to get to this point. But they decided, let's not stop here. And we were partnering with them and helping them understand the art of the possible. And so they said, well, let's go on to step 2. And step 2 is around refreshing the customer experience and digital transformation. And again, analytics, getting to that insight, it isn't where all the value is. There's value there, but it's not all the value. And so what we partner with them on is refreshing those different mobile applications and customer portals and starting to integrate the analytics into the point of action, into those different digital experiences. And so that was a big win and a lot of momentum and a lot of advancement from that perspective. And then we decided, you know what? It doesn't stop there. Let's go on to the third step. And this is the part that I get really excited about. And so as we continue on that third step and started looking at more advanced capabilities, we walked them through a process, and it was really around unplanned maintenance analytics and really predicting when a specific maintenance event would happen, unplanned maintenance event would happen. When is this transmission going to fail, or when is this engine going to fail? And so we worked through a variety of statistical models and survival analysis and decision trees, and ultimately got to a point where we could predict out within given mileage bands the likelihood of failure of a specific part in a vehicle using historical repair data and a variety of different sources. But again, we didn't stop there. We took those insights and that information, we integrated it back into the point of action, into those key operational systems and applications that those buyers and sellers use on a daily basis, so they can make more informed, better buying and selling decisions. But again, it took a lot of effort, not only on the technology side. There's a lot of modern technology and capabilities and platforms to get to this point, but there's a business process improvement. There's change management. There's changing the way we think, and there's changing the way that we do things. And that's ultimately, this organization made an investment last mile and really saw some big results from it.
Yeah, Josh, I think that's such a good example, and to your point, really saw the tangible results in terms of cost savings and a better experience. And so as we think about that, as we work with our clients, the value's there, right? The business case is there, but it often is extremely challenging to take something like a Pac-Man example, right? Or refrigerator analytics and go, Michael, Josh, that's great, that's cool, but I don't understand how that plays out in my business.
I thought that's what they pay me for.
Exactly, in a way that translates to dollars. And so what we often do, we've got an example here with a kind of a field service client. So you can think about a cable company or oil field services organization where they've got some assets or devices out in the field, and their customers are paying them essentially a subscription. So the name of the game for them to optimize profitability is reduce the number of times they have to send a technician out to address that device or that unit. And so what we do is we start with the business process, right? Hey, draw on a whiteboard your business model at the highest level. Who's involved? What are the people? What are the core processes? And then we start going through and we say, where do you have efficiencies? Where do you have decisions that happen? How long do they take? How many people are involved? We really kind of start going through it and think of sitting on a whiteboard or standing in front of a whiteboard and using a blue marker and saying, here's an area where there may be inefficiencies or opportunities to optimize. And as you start then thinking about that, those become your analytics use cases. And more to the point, those become real dollars in terms of revenue lifts from your customers, whether it's new service offerings or an enhanced customer experience they're offering, or the ones that are a little easier to identify are the cost savings and efficiencies. And so if you think about this example, just in the first few hours of a workshop with this client on day one, we were able to go through and say, hey, there's two big pieces on here where those dollars are substantial. What if we could take the data, the kind of the operational readings on the device, and mine that data, apply some algorithms and say, hey, we can get better about predicting when the device will fail and prevent it from failing altogether, right? Huge savings there. Then a second use case would be, okay, let's say that some of these do fail. That's okay, we got to deal with it. It's part of our business model. What if we could get smarter about sending our technician out with the right part the first time to fix the issue? So you think about those use cases, right? Preventing the issue, and then predicting what parts or what troubleshooting they may need to kind of have in their toolkit when they go out there. Those things translate to a tangible business case for an analytics investment, like what we've been talking about. And so think about that. You think about the example in fleet management that Josh gave. The real takeaway here is it's bigger than technology, right? This is as much about change management as it is about data science. And so we started this conversation talking about that 1 and 2, right? 1 and 2 of these projects fail. If you take one thing away from this presentation from me, it's this slide, right? When you're building out a business case for an analytics transformation, or you're building out your plan, some of the things you see right now, change management, workforce transformation and upskilling, some of those data-driven cultural issues, right? Are we used to making decisions based on the data? These are the common pitfalls in analytics transformation that we work with our clients from day one, really day zero, to embed in that analytics transformation plan to increase the likelihood or the probability of success.
Well, one of the things that we do to at least start the conversation around this is we talked earlier about this kind of maturing phase around analytics. And so we spend a lot of times conducting lunch and learns as part of the engagements with our clients and kind of showing the art of the possible and talking about what data and analytics can achieve. And we're not just talking to an IT audience, we're also talking to the business audience. And we're going, look, this is where you can get to. Here's where you are today. Here's what you can get to. It starts to get people thinking. And then we start to go, oh, and by the way, it's kind of the carrot. By the way, we got to really get our data governance really kind of to a next level. People go, all right, now we got to get going. And so it gets people stirred up. It gets people excited about it, but then they also feel some accountability for it as well. So again, you kind of start that conversation before you even get to this point.
So we've got a question here from the chat function, which is, you're speaking about change management, and that sounds cool, but the question here is, how do you enable or drive that change management from the excitement of a lunch and learn?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that one coming in from the folks on the phone. You know, a big piece of this is making the analytics transformation driven from, or getting it to be driven from your frontline employees. So we drew that process map there, right? The folks who actually do that work are the ones who understand the pain points and the inefficiencies best. And so as you start laying out a plan, pulling them into those conversations of, hey, what do you think we should be doing? What would make your life easier if we provided kind of better insights or better analytics through that process? That's a key first step in kind of laying out the right change management plan. That's really on that communication side up front. And then as you're going through it, a lot of workshops with folks, again, to make them, you know, you want them to be part of the process as you're going through it, as opposed to it being something pushed out from corporate or from the IT group.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is sort of the good news, bad news with this whole advanced analytics space is the good news that there's some really cool and really exciting and really impactful work that we can do. The bad news is that we're being pushed to define up front a next level of detail around ROI because this is so transformational and there can be a lot of dollars that can sometimes go into this. And so one of the things that we do is in taking that sort of, here's the financial impacts. I give the example of obsolete inventory and saying, here you have a $3 million opportunity and this is what we're after. Well, now that we have that defined and there's some business owners and some key stakeholders that own that value, now we have to say, oh, and by the way, here's the 10 risks, and here's the 10 dependencies, and here's what all these different audiences need to do and get in lockstep and lock arms on in order for us to be successful. And so that's why it is a next level of complexity and why change management is so important. We have to push that conversation.
Yep, absolutely. And so as we move ahead and kind of build on that, I want to talk about a case study here that really hammers home that idea of the people transformation and the change management aspects. And this is one of our clients in the telecom, the cable space. And they were really challenged several years ago with increased customer churn, right? Customers disconnecting, which anyone who's familiar with the cable business knows that's kind of the bread and butter, is retaining and growing the customer base. And so what was interesting was, as you started to do some of the analysis, the customers they were losing were oftentimes their highest value customers. So the impact was even more pronounced on their financials. So naturally they said, we've got to solve this problem, right? We've got to increase our retention of high value customers. And so as we worked through that, we said, you know, the first step is identifying those customers that are highest value, and then saying, what is their risk profile? And if you think about that, if I am high value but low risk based on certain characteristics of my service has been working fine, no issues, I don't have good competition in the area, whatever those things may be, they probably want to pay a little less attention to me than someone who's high value and high risk. So I'll pick on Josh over here, right? Let's say he's paying for video service and the phone service and internet. He's paying this company a ton of money every month. But he also has their competitor sending him mailers, calling him all the time, offering him cheaper services. And he's had downtime the last month, right? His cable went down twice, his internet's dropped. He's high risk. So the whole idea here was for those high risk, high value, we need to offer a differentiated customer service, almost that white glove kind of idea. So what that translated to was heavy technical work, analytics work on customer segmentation, on changing their call routing system to ensure that we delivered the high value, high risk customers to a universal agent with more offers available and more experience. And that was a kind of a heavy technical lift. But you think about all that, what it really translates to is, okay, you change all that, you segment the customer, you get better about predicting churn, you change your call routing. What happens when the call actually lands in the call center? And so that's where there was a heavy focus on training, on upskilling, and on saying, hey, this is our 10-year veteran call center agent. We're going to empower this person to be a universal agent with a lot of offers and equip them to handle these high value, high risk customers versus, Michael. We don't care about Michael too much. We're just going to route him over to our newest agent. So really tremendous results in terms of decreasing their churn, increasing their long-term profitability. But so much of the effort, again, had to do with what are the people transformation aspects of this from a communication, change management, and training perspective.
So we've got another quick question here. It's back on the fleet management case, and I think it's a two-part question. Was IoT used in the case of fleet management for what you talked to? And in second part is that avoidable, or is it, how important is that to data acquisition? Maybe just kind of give a general point of view from what you see in the market.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I would say that, so to answer the specific question around fleet management, the answer to that actually is yes and no. We did not use real-time IoT sensor data for the vehicles, but we did use rolled up information from the data warehouse for that specific use case. And again, it's very specific to the use case. We have a lot of scenarios and a lot of data science initiatives that we do that have nothing to do with IoT. And so in those cases, whether it's customer churn or maintenance analytics around work orders or things of that nature, that IoT data set is not as important. I will say that it's less about IoT and it's more about the technologies to acquire that data, meaning the data pipelines and handling the complexity of the requirements around it. And so I think that's really the spirit of the question, is recognizing that IoT represents a larger volume of information that's coming in at a faster pace than we're used to. The good news is that a lot of the cloud platforms and cloud technologies that a lot of our clients are starting to move to can handle IoT in a much greater capacity than we have ever before.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And so moving on, as we've talked through some of these case studies and how we approach last mile, I hope that one thing that's coming through loud and clear is this idea of iterating, right? On these projects, there's so much work to be done, so much technical work, so much change management and people transformation involved that you can't take a big bang approach. It's just a recipe for disaster. And so what we work with our clients on is, let's build out kind of a crawl, walk, run plan. Let's determine some proof of concepts, some early iterations where we can get some value. We can prove out that organizationally and technically we can handle some of this. And then we'll keep kind of expanding and scaling that up. And this is where some of the advances in technology over the last few years really help us. Because as more and more of these platforms are cloud-based, and Josh can certainly attest to this, it becomes much easier for us to scale our investments as the organization becomes more adept at kind of being an analytics-driven organization. So again, building out some of those use cases, we often find it very effective to roll out analytics within a specific function. Josh talked about obsolete inventory. You can build out some of that momentum within a supply chain group, or go do it within accounting, within finance, right? How do we embed analytics in our forecasting? You do that, you start to build that organizational buy-in and momentum so that when you go to tackle the more challenging cross-functional use cases, you've got all the right people around the table nodding heads that this is real and they've seen the value. That certainly helps as you move through an analytics journey.
Yeah, and I did want to say, we mentioned cloud a couple of times. A lot of the clients that we're partnering with are still, in some kind of hybrid scenario, or maybe not even to the cloud yet. Cloud is not mandatory or requirement for this, but it can enable more agility and more rapid development of data and analytic solutions.
Absolutely. So Josh, kind of on that theme of iterating, why don't you kind of take that back to refrigerator analytics?
All right, back to the fun stuff that they pay me the big bucks for. So as we go back to refrigerator analytics, we really took this use case and we started to kind of eat our own dog food and look at, how we apply methodologies and frameworks to the problems that we're solving for our clients. And so if you look at that second milestone there, we'd already sort of identified this use case or this need of better inventory management of our beer in our refrigerator at the office. And we had also gotten to a point where we had implemented a small scale solution to create an alert to notify a human. And certainly there was some value there, and we saved some dollars from a human capital perspective. But really, as we sort of thought and sat and looked at sort of the art of the possible, we thought, you know what? I think we sold ourselves short. I think we weren't thinking big enough. And so as we continued down that path, we determined through a variety of discussions and discovery and analysis that we could really take this one step further and automate the entire purchase via Instacart and really remove a step altogether from a human input, human perspective. And then we kind of took a stop and pause and said, you know what, are we still selling ourselves short? We've created this solution that provides us a lot of value. And then we decided that, we need to think bigger. And as part of that, we determined that, hey, you know what? We built this solution that can actually scale to other types of problems within a similar context, and we can actually automate all of our grocery buying experience. And so we're in a process of working through that, and ultimately, this is where we're realizing the true value of last mile analytics for ourselves as it relates to refrigerator analytics.
So what you're telling me is pretty soon you'll be able to purchase enough limes to go with my dough.
That's right. We're working on it.
Well, great. I love that. I think it kind of ties it all together. And just to hammer home some of the takeaways we've talked about throughout the presentation, really start with the business goals. It is so easy to fall into the trap of starting with the technology. I hope that some of what we've talked about has gotten you excited about the possibilities. It really has to start with the business goals, and then we back into the technology needs. The second one is the data pyramid that Josh showed, right? You need a strong foundation. It doesn't mean you have to figure out every layer, as we talked about, but you do need to be thinking about the holistic kind of data pyramid and data ecosystem. Number three, it's in the middle of the screen for a reason. It was the topic of the presentation. Think about the last mile, right? That connection point between your technology, your analytics, and your people and your processes is so critical. And so we encourage you to think about that from day one. Fourth is it's bigger than analytics. The reason Josh and I are co-presenting on this is there's so much of that people and process transformation required to succeed in this space. And again, that's really from day one, something you can do to set your project up for success. And then lastly, think big, but start small. It's all about iteration and kind of finding incremental wins as you go through the program. As Justin Wynn commented here, if automating your beer supply doesn't motivate you to do data science, then what will? So start with some smaller cases like that, and you build up to the bigger ones that certainly can have a tangible impact on the enterprise. So I want to give a little bit of time. We've got a little bit of time left to answer any other questions.
Let's see if there's any more questions that come through. We got one last here. With so many tools and vendors for data science and analytics, how do you go about trying to pick the best ones to employ? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so we're in the thick of this at a variety of different clients and partners of ours, and really it's similar to how we would do tool selection in the past. We have a specific set of business challenges. We need to enable that with technology. We need to understand some level of the requirements for our specific project and what we're trying to achieve, and then we back into, what are the tools and the platforms really to support that. And, with this, I would say that we spend a lot more time with vendors, with their architects. These tools and technologies are evolving on the daily. And so if we implemented a solution using a specific technology platform a month ago, then a month later, there's already a new set of capabilities and features and tooling and automation. And so we find that partnering with vendors is really something that requires a next level of effort. And so finding the right consulting partner who has those relationships with those vendors is really critical in this space.
Okay, we've got one more, I think, question here, which is, this all sounds kind of cool, and you mentioned earlier around making the business case, you're being asked to provide the nth level of detail that don't have that. Yet at the same time, how are you selling things like refrigerator analytics? So can you talk a little bit more just briefly about how do you make the business case for an advanced analytics investment?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question. And, as we've talked about some of these examples, these are year-long journeys oftentimes to build these things out. But in terms of the business case and where to start, those are things you can solve for up front with some workshops. That's often what we work with our clients on, is saying, hey, let's start again with your business model, your processes. Let's identify where there's inefficiencies or opportunities to generate more value, and then say, how would analytics help us solve that problem? Oftentimes, we're able to do that with a handful of use cases and candidly generate enough value to support an initial investment in some POCs, some technology sandboxing. And typically, you kind of get a flywheel effect as you start to build that out, where each of these POCs deliver some value, and you get more organizational understanding, buy-in, and certainly approval for larger investments.
Okay, thank you. I think with that, we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. Thank you all for attending Closing the Last Mile Advanced Analytics. We hope that you've enjoyed the content that we reviewed today. You will receive a follow-up email with the webinar recording. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact Josh or Mike Lee directly with the email provided in the introductory slides, or visit our website at sensecorp.com. Lots of great information and other ways to reach out and connect with us. Again, thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thank you so much.